Our Field Manual 5499, Chapter 5, Valves. Valves are used in the hydraulic system to control the operation of actuator valve regulator pressure for the creating special pressure conditions, control how much oil will flow into the portion circuit where it will go. Three categories of hydraulic valves are pressure control valve, volume control, directional control. See Figure 5.1. Some of the valves have multiple functions, placing them into more than one category. Valves are also rated by size, pressure capabilities, pressure drop and flow. Pressure control valve may be limited to regulate pressure for the created with a particular pressure condition required for the control cause actuator to operate in the specific order. With the all pure pressure control valves operate with a condition approaching hydraulic balance. Usually balance is very simple. The pressure effective at the one side of the end of the ball pop at the spool with the opposite side opposed by a spring. An operation valve takes a position wherever the hydraulic pressure balance of the spring force. Some of the spring force varies. Pressure for the difference pressure can be also vary. Pressure control valves are said to be infinite position. This means that they can take a position anywhere between the two finite flow conditions, which change large volume to small volume or pass no flow. Pressure control valves classified normally closed, this means flow through the valve inlet port is blocked from the outlet port, usually enough pressure to cover the unbalanced operation. Normal open valve free flow occurs when the valve is until the beginning of the operating balance that slowly, partially restrict the cutoff of the pressure override characteristic. Normally closed pressure controls when they operating in a balance because the force of the compression spring springs increase the lower and pressure when the valves are in first cracks less than when they are passing a large volume of full volume or full flow. This difference between full flow and cracking pressure is called override. Shows pressure control, directional control, and volume control. Relief valve. The relief valves are most common type of the pressure control valve. The relief valve function may vary depending on the system need, but it can provide overload protection with the tricky components with limited force for the torque conserved with a linear actuator, weighter, or rotary motor. The internal design of all relief valves is basically similar, but the valve consists of the two sections. The body section contained with the piston retained by the seat with the spring depending on the model and carrying over the pilot valve section with the hydraulic controls of the body piston movement and adjusting the screws adjust the control of the range of valves. Valves provide emergency overload protection, do not operate since the alpha and the valve types the load in the load pump. However, the relief valve should be cleaned with a regular reducing pressure adjustment. Flush out any possible sludge deposit that may accumulate. Operating under the reduced pressure will clean the out the pressure sludge deposit and ensure the valve operate properly after the pressure adjusted to prescribed setting. 1. Simple type of the Figure 5.2 show that the simple type of the relief valve of the valve is installed with a one port connected with the pressure line or inlet or other port with the reservoir of the ball is held with the seat with the thrust spring, which can be chained with the turning adjusting screw. With the pressure of the valve inlet is sufficient to overcome spring force, the ball remains off the seat with the valve cove to prevent flow through it. But when the pressure of the valve inlet exceeds the adjusted spring force, the ball is open and the liquid flows with the pressure line with the valve from valve to the reservoir. The diversion of the flow prevents further the pressure increase in the pressure line with the pressure decrease at the below the valve setting when the spring resets the ball when the valve is again closed. Figure 5.2 shows a simple relief valve from the pressure line seat the ball to the reservoir and spring and adjusting screw. The pressure of the valves first begins the press flow with the cracking pressure of the valve. The pressure of the valve passes the full rated capacity, full flow pressure of the valve. The cover the spring rated full pressure is higher than the cracking pressure. The condition is referred to the pressure override. The disadvantage similar type relief valve is relatively high pressure override its rated capacity. 2. The compound type of the Figure 5.3 show that the compound type relief valve passes sheave to keep the piston hydraulic balance within the valve with inlet position pressure less than its setting in the diagram A. The valve setting is determined by adjusting the thrust spring 3 with against poppet 4 with the pressure valve inlet with the reach of the valve setting of the pressure passage D to overcome the thrusting of spring 3 with the flow through the capacity C to create sufficient pressure drop overcome the thrust spring 2 pistons are raised off the seat in the diagram B. This allows the pass of the discharge port with the reservoir prevents further rise in the pressure. Alright, so in diagram A, you have the inlet with the 1 with the piston rod, and 2, the C would be the passage C to the relief valve, 2, the spring with D, the 4 with the compressor, adjusting spring, and open inlet, closed, restricting valve, adjusting seat. pressure reducing valve. The valve limited with the branch pipe with the less of the amount with the required with the main circuit. For example, this is the branch pipe circuit with the 300 psi with the main circuit that must operate at 800 psi. Relief valve with the main circuit adjusted to the setting above at 800 psi to meet the main circuit requirements. However, the wood circuit have the branch circuit with the pressure of 300 psi, but therefore beside the relief valve with the main circuit with the pressure reducing valve that must be installed with the branch circuit is set 300 psi with the figure 5-4 show with the pressure reducing valve. And pressure reducing valve with diagram A, adjusting spring compressor to obtain the maximum branch circuit pressure for the spring also holds spool 1. Pressure reducing valve adjusting pressure diagram A, adjusting screw drain in the tank. High pressure C, adjusting pressure line, adjusting screw drain in the tank. Low, adjusting low pressure, high pressure. To open the position liquid from the main circuit with the end of the valve, and then let port C flow over the valve spool with the end of the machine branch circuit with the root of the outlet port D with the pressure for the outlet port, and although the passage E with the bottom of the spool with the pressure insufficient with the overcoming the thrust of the spring valve remains open. The pressure outlet port diagram B under the spool exceed with the equivalent thrust of the spring with the spool right with the valve with the partial cove with the creep of the valve, the resistance with the flow with the crave with the greater pressure drop through the valve, reduce with the pressure of the outlet port with the small with the position with itself lit, the maximum pressure of the outlet port regardless of the position of the fluctuation in that port as long as the workload does not cause backflow over the outlet port. Backflow would cause the valve close of the valve and pressure would increase. The X series type, the figure 5-5 show the internal combustion of the X series with the pressure for the reducing valve with the two major assembly, adjustable pilot valve with assembly income to determine the operating pressure of the valve with the spool assembly in the body respond with the action with the pilot valve limiting the maximum shroud with the outlet port. Pilot valve assembly consists of the poppet 1, spring 2 with adjusting screw 3 with the position of the adjusting screw with the spring load with the poppet to determine the setting of the valve. Spool assembly consists of spool 4 and spring 5 with the spring is lower as the rating of the with the tends to force the spring downward and hold the valve open. The position spool determines the size of passage C. So per A you have inlet and outlet, two outlets and an inlet port and drain and adjusting screw and spring loaded pop double acting cylinder. And then B, when the pressure in the valve of the diagram A, but it does not exceed the pressure setting of the valve with a completely open and with a fluid path of the inlet outlet with a minimal resistance on the rated capacity of the valve. Passage G connects with the outlet port with the bottom of the spool with the passage E connects the chamber at each end of the spool with the fluid pressure with the outlet port with the present of the both ends of the spool with the pressures are equal to the spool with the hydraulically bound with the only effective force of the spool with the downward thrust of the spring with the position of the spool tends to margin maintain passage C with the maximum side of the pressure with the at the valve's outlet with the diagram B approach of the pressure setting of the valve with the liquid pressure over the chamber A position with the overcome of the thrust of the spring and the force of the poppet of its C with the pilot valve limits with the pressure chamber F with the pressure rise with the outlet push with the spool upward against the combined force with the spring and the pressure chamber F. At the spool with the upward restrict the opening with the crave with the pressure drop between the inlet and outlet port pressure of the outlet and limited with the sum of the equivalent forces spring 2 and 5 with the normal operation passage C with the normally complete with the flow with the must pass through with the meet any of the work requirements of the low pressure side of the valve plus the flow required through passage E, maintain the pressure drop needed to hold the spool with the flow control position. Flow through the restricted passage E is continual when the valve is controlling reduced pressure. If the flow is out, the drain port should be returned directly to the tank. 2. The XC series type. XC series type pressure reducing valve line pressure for the outlet. Same type of the X series that does flow with the inlet port with the outlet port with the integral check valve with the reverses of flow free of the outlet inlet port. Even pressures of the valve saying however the same pressure producing action now provided for the direction flow with the figure 5-6 show the internal construction of the XC series valve. Figure 5-6 shows the internal construction XC series valve. Shows check valve with the valve, reverse free flow, outlet flow, inlet flow, adjustable valve with a double acting cylinder. Sequence valve with control of the operating sequence between two branches of the circuit with the valve with the commonly used with the regulator with the operating sequence with the two separate work cylinders with the cylinder one cylinder begin with the stroke with the other complete stroke with the sequence valve using the manager for their minimum pressure equal to the setting of the first cylinder during the subsequent operation low pressure. Figure 5-7 the diagram A shows how to retain the operation sequence pressure by adjusting spring compression from the hole with the piston 1 with the closed piston with the liquid ends with the valve with the inlet port C with the flow with the free with the path with the piston 1 into the primary circuit 3 with the port D with the press pressure for the liquid flowing with the valve that begins the valve setting with a force acting upward on the piston when less than the downward force of the spring and 2. Piston is held down and the valve is closed position. When the resistance of the piston and primary circuit with the pressure for the rise is overcome with the force of the spring 2 with the piston 1, valve 1 opens with in figure 5 of the diagram B with the liquid enter with the valve that can now flow through port E of the secondary circuit. Show the closed A inlet and outlet port 1, 2, and 3 with the drain. Inlet port sequence valve 1 and 2 drain out inlet and outlet. Open and close sequence valve. Alright, figure 5A show the application sequence valve set with a pressure set with the required started cylinder, 1 primary cylinder in its action. Show the application sequence valve with the number 1, number 2 cylinder sequence valve, directional valve, relief valve, pump, check valve, tank. First operating sequence with the pump flows go through the port A and C with the primary port, force the cylinder 1 to stroke with the shave with the close to cover the pressure, cylinder 1 below with the valve, segment with the cylinder 1 finish with the stroke with the block, and the flow is blocked with the system pressure for the instantly increase with the valve setting with the open valve with the pump flow with the stroke with the cylinder 2 secondary cylinder. During this phase with the flow of the pilot oil through the balance of the orifice governed with the piston of the main piston. The piston throws throttle flows for the port B with the secondary port with the pressure equal to the valve setting maintained with the primary circuit during the middle band of the cylinder 2 active low pressure back pressure created with the resistance of the cylinder 2 cannot interfere with the low pressure of the back pressure created with the resistance cylinder cannot interfere with the throttle acting because of the secondary pressure below the stem of the main piston only also applied through the drain hole with the top of the stem and thereby canceled out when the cylinder 2 is retracted with the return flow bypass sequence valve through the check valve. Counterbalance valve with the counterbalance will allow with the free flow of the one direct for the maintenance of the resistance flow in one other direction until the current and pressure of the reach valve normally located between the directional control valve and the outlet. Vertical mount with the actuating cylinder with the support of the wave but must be held with the position of the period of the time counterbalance valve series with the hydraulic resistance actuated cylinder. For example, counterbalance valve is used with a hydraulic operated forklift. It offers resistance flow with the actuating cylinder with the fork is lowered. It also helps with the support of the forklift up position. Figure 5.9 show the counterbalance valve with the element balance spool valve 4 with the 2 pistons with the permanently fixed at either end of the shaft of the inner position area equal therefore with the pressure acts equal on both areas with regards to the position of the valve with no effect with the movement of the valve at the ends for the determinate balance of the small pilot piston and attached to the bottom of the spool valve. Figure 9 show with the counterbalance valve. 1 would be your adjustment screw, 2 would be the internal drain, 3 the spring, 4 the spool, 5 the pressure inlet, 6 the pilot passage, 7 check valve, and 8 discharge outlet reverse flow inlet valve. When the valve with the closed position, top position, spool valve, discharge port 8 fluid is actuating. Unit enter for the inlet port with the 5 cannot through the valve with the become discharge of port B. Port A becomes the block out with the fluid will flow with the pilot passage 6 with the small piston, pilot piston with the pressure increase with the action with the pilot piston with the overcome with the pressure preset pressure with the spring C. 3 force the spool up with the valve with the fluid around the shaft of the spool valve with the discharge port 8. During reverse flow fluid enter with the port 8 with the spring 3 force the spool valve 4 with the low position fluid pressure with overcome with the spring test and checks valve 7. Open to the valve with the free flow around the shaft of the spool valve with the outlet port port 5 with the operating pressure of the valve that can be adjusted with the turning adjusting screw 1 which increase the degree of the tension of the spring with adjusting depends on the wave of the valve must support. Small amounts of fluid would leak around with the top of the piston spool valve and into the area around the spring 3 with accumulating would cover the hydraulic lock over the top of the spool of the valve since the liquid cannot be compressed with the drain 2 provides passage of the fluid to flow with the port 8. Pressure switches you with the various application required with adjusting of the pressure action with electrical to the make with the brake with the electrical circuit with the predetermined pressure with the electrical circuit that may be the action with the electrical control valve with the control with the electrical motor to start or signal light with the figure type 10 show with the pressure switch liquid under with the pressure into the chamber A with the if the pressure C with adjusting pressure setting spring behind ball 1 the ball is unseen with the liquid flow with the chamber with the B with the move of the 2 piston 2 with the right with the actuated limited brake with the electrical circuit. 5 tension with the limiting switch adjusting screw with the 1 2 and 3 4 port spring 5 and spring. When the pressure in chamber A below the setting with the spring valve behind ball 1 spring resets ball 1 and the liquid chamber to B with the valve pass valve with the 3 and ball 4 because extra spring behind piston 2 the time required with the limit the switch will return to the normal position during the determined valve 3 settings. 5 2. Directional control valve. Directional control valves also control flow with the direction however they're able to consider the physical characteristics of the operation of the valves may be able to pop the type of the positive piston valve moves on and off C with the rotary spool type which spool will rotate with about the axis. Sliding spool type with which the spool slides actually in a bore within this type of the spool with the off the classified according with the flow with the condition created with the wind with the normal neutral position closed center supply. Spool blocks all valve ports with each other when in the normal position. Open spool and center spool with all the valves are open with each other when the spool with the normal position. Directional control valves may also be classified according to the method used with the actuator with the valve element, pop at the type of the hydraulic operator with the rotary spool type, manually lever or plunger action, mechanically cam or trip action, electrically solenoid action. Operated sliding type spools must be manually, mechanical, electrically, hydraulically operated, and may be operated with a combination. Direction control valves may also be classified according to the number of the position of the valve elements, 12 with the number of the flow paths for the provide with the extreme position for the extreme 3-position 4-way valve. It has 2 extreme positions, the central and neutral position, and each of the 2 extreme positions there are 2 flow paths, making a total of 4 flow paths. Spool valves figure 511 are popular mounted hydraulic system because they can be precision ground line fine oil metering can be made with a hand or flow with many direction extra lanes and oil ports. Stacking easy one compact control package which is important with the mobile system. Spool valves have the required with the good maintenance with the dirty oil with the damage over the main ship of the very lands caught with these lose accuracy with the dirt will cause these valves with the slack work erratically. All spool valves may be accurately machined with the fitted into the bores. Pop of the valve figure 512 show with the figure 10 show with the simple pop of the valve with the primary move with the pop that closes against the valve sheet with the pressure for the inside 10 with the valve tightly closed with the slight force applied with the pop that says stem of the opens of the pop of this action similar to the valve of the automobile engine. Pop of the stem usually has an O-ring seal to prevent leakage of some of the valve with the poppets for the help in the seat position by the spring with the number of poppets in the valve depending on the purpose of the valve. Figure 511 shows the spool valve. Alright, sliding spool valve with the figure 513 shows the sliding spool valve element slides back and forth back to uncover the ports of the housing. It's called the piston type of the sliding spool valve with the piston in the inner area with the equal of the pressure inlet ports are equal on both the inner pistons regardless of the position of the spool. Sealing is done by the machine fitting which may be by the spool or valve body or sleeve. Figure 512 show the operation of simple poppet valve. Show the inlet, the poppet in the valve C with the outlet. Inlet poppet valve C with the outlet. Figure 513 shows the operation of sliding spool directional control of the outlet blocked by piston. Spool shifted to the left. Spool shifted to the right. Port open into flow. Check valves. Check valves are most commonly used for the fluid power system. The area's flow of one direction prevents flow in the other direction. May be installed independently in alignment. They may be incorporated with the integral part of the sequence. The counterbalance pressure reducing valve of the valve element may be a sleeve of the cone with a pop of the piston, spool, or disc. Force of moving fluid opens with the check valve of the back flow with the spring with the gravity closed of the valve. Figure 514, 515, 516 show various types of the check valves. Your standard type of the figure 517, page 512 with the valve with the mid-right angle with the inlet type depending on the relative of the location of the ports, both type they operate with the same principle. The valve consists essentially of a poppet or ball 1 held on the sheet by the force of the spring 2 with the flow directed for the inlet port with the action with the spring 2 with the unseat with the poppet 1 opening with the valve through the flow V figure 517 diagram B with the both valve types. Flow entering the valve from the outlet port combined with the spring action hold pop to 1 on the C with the check with the reverse flow of the valves are available in various cracking pressure for the conventional application. Usually use the light spring because of the ensure the reseating of the pops regardless of the valves. Mounting position have the spring with the generally use the ensure the availability of the least minimum required pilot operation 2. The restriction figure 514 shows the swing type check valve open and closed, and then shows the vertical check valve open and closed. 2 restriction type figure 518, 512 with the valve with the orifice plug 1 with the nose of the poppet 2 will make for the differential conventional right angle check valve with the low direct for the inlet port with the outlet valve open the valve 3 flow with the valve with the reverse valve with the directed through with the outlet port C with the pop with the 2 flows restricted with the amount with the oil with which can be altered with the valve with the suitable belief with the poppet to go with the use with the restriction check valve maybe to control the lowering speed with the downward moving position and with the rate of the compression if large presses. Pilot operated with a figure 519, page 513, with a diagram A with a valve with a pop with 1, C with a stationary sleeve with 2, with a surprise spring with 3, with a valve with the opening with a chain with a conventional check port with the pressure for the inlet port with the must be sufficient. Overcome combined port with the pressure for the outlet port with the line through with the spring 3 with a pop with 1, raised the valve with the flow with the inlet port 2 with the outlet port with the situation. There is no pressure required at the pilot port. In diagram V, the valve is preventing the reverse flow of the pressure of the outlet port with the thrust of spring 3 with a hole with the pop to 1 seat block with the flow. In this case, the pilot port has no pressure. 516 show the spring loaded check valve with the 1, 2, and 3 with the inlet and outlet pressure for the spring of the 1 is 2 with the cone or sleeve, and then valve 3 is the valve seat. Right angle check valve closed and opened. Inline check valve closed and open. Restriction and check valve open and inlet open and outlet shut and closed. Figure 19 shows the pilot operated check valve with the in and outlet port with no pilot pressure, and pilot pressure. By pressure for the other ports with the raised piston floor with the gun seat with the operable and out with the control flow with the outlet with the inlet port with no pressure for the inlet port with the pilot pressure for the seat with the 40% of the input with the outlet with the open and pop. Figure 520 show with another pilot operated check valve with the valve with the pop to 1, screw with the piston 3, pop with the 1 half against the seat 4 with the reaction, spring 2 with the piston 3 with the inlet diagram of the valve with the free flow piston with the pressure for the inlet port acting downward against the pop to 1. Insufficient overcome combined force the spring with the 2 again with the piston 3 with the pressure for the any with the outlet port with the pressure for the outlet port with the greater effect of the air with the inlet cover the prop with the stem of the drain post with the open tank. There's no pressure for the pilot port with the diagram B show with the valve with the in with the position with the pilot prevent the reverse of the no pressure pilot port with the draining opening within the tank. Valve open by flow show with the valve and no pressure for the port within the 3, 2 with the 1 and the drain valve within 4 show with the and no pressure for the pipe and the valve with the drain inlet pilot pressure inlet valve may be opened by the pilot. Diagram 3 show the pilot operating valve with sufficient pressure applied with the pilot overcome with the thrust with the spring 2 with the negative effect with the pressure of the ports of the pop at the 1 with the unseat with the valve with the reverse flow with the pilot pressure must be equal to about 80% of the imposed outlet port with the open valve with the valve with the reverse flow with the two-way valve with the two-way valve the general with the control with the directional fluid with the hydraulics chapter with the sliding spool valve with the figure 521. Show with the two-way sliding with the spool direction control valve. The spool makes back with the floor with the either allow with the pressure fluid with the root of the valve with the shift the position with the two-way valve with the pressure port with the opening with the cylinder port with the opposite cylinder port with now open with the tank with the port with the valve with the usually primary for the draining with the four-way valve, four-way the direction control valve, with the control of the direction fluid flow with the hydraulic circuit with the control of the direction of the movement with the work zone with the rotation of the fluid motor with the valve with the usually sliding spool type with the typical four-way direction control valve that has 4 ports, 1 pressure port connected with the pressure line, 1 return exhaust port with the thing of the reservoir, 2 working ports connected by the line's actuating unit. And you figure the four-way valve with the rectangular cast valve with the sliding spool with the wave with the position spool with the precision fitted with the bore with the root with the longitudinal axis with the valve body with the land of the spool to divide with the bore with the tier with the separate chamber with the bore with the valve body lead the chamber with the spool position determine the ports with the often each with the other which one with the seal with the other with each other ports are sealed from each other with one position with the interconnect with another position spool position with the accomplished manually mechanically electrically hydraulically combining any of the 4. Figure 522 show the spool position determines for the possible flow condition with the circle with the 4 ports with the mark P, T, A, and P. P is connected with the flow source, T with the tank, A and B with the respective ports working some of the hydraulic motor other than the valve of the circuit. In diagram A is spool with the position of the port P with its open to the port A and port B with the open to port T with the ports A and B with the connectivity ports with the cylinder through port P causes. Figure 521 shows the two-way valve with the ports in and out in the back to the reservoir, so you have the two in and out and to the reservoir. Alright, shows the spool port A and B. Piston of the cylinder moves to the right with the return flow cylinder passes through the B and T with the diagram B and diagram B. Port P is open to port P with P Piston moves to the left with the return flow of the cylinder passes port A and T with the figure table 5.1 page 516 lists some of the classification directional control valve. These valves can be identified according to number of spool position, number of flow path with extreme position, flow pattern with the center of the crossover position, method of shifting spool, method of providing spool return. Your poppet type valve with the figure 523 with the show of the page 516 show with the typical 4-wave poppet type of the direction control valve with the manual operator valve with the group with the conventional with the spring load poppet with the poppet include with the common housing with the interconnected with the docks with the direction with the fluid flow with the direction desired direction. Pods are actuated by cam with the camshaft with the range so with the shaft with the rotate with the controlling lever will open with the correct poppet the combination with the direction with the fluid flow with the desired with the actuating unit. At the same time, the fluid will be directed with the opposite line with the actuating unit through the valve with the back to the reservoir exhaust with the atmosphere. 5.2 show the classification direction control valve path of flow type 2 or 4-way with 2-way allows 2 possible flow paths for the 2 extreme spool positions. 4-way allows total of 4 possible flow paths for the 2 extreme spool positions. Control type manual operated pilot operated solenoid operated cylinder control pilot operated hand manually operated hand lever G with the shift of the spool. Pilot operated hydraulic pressure G with the shift of the spool for solenoid action with the shift of the spool. Solenoid operated solenoid action G with the shift of the integral pilot. Solenoid control pilot operated spool is directed with the pilot with the shift of the main spool. Position type 2 position spool has 2 extreme positions as well. 3 and spool has 2 extreme position plus 1 intermediate center position. 3. Spring type spring offset. Spring action automatically returns spool normally offset with assuming with the spring shift of the force is released. Springs offset with always a 2-way valve. No spring. Spools and not spring loaded is moved only by the shifter force remaining the shift of maybe the 2 or 3 position, but the 3 position type U with the 10. Spring center. Spring action automatically returns the spool to the center position. Soon if the shifter force is released, spring center is always 3 position valve. Spool type open and closed tandem center with the partially closed and semi-open center. There are 5 or more common spool types. Refer to these flow patterns allowable to spool with the center position 3 position valve, crossover position 2 position valve. Spring over the poppet tube with the camshaft with the untube with the valve with the fluid flow with the valve with the camshaft with the control with the by moving the handle with the valve is operative with the moving the handle manually with the connecting with the handle mechanical link with the control with the handle with the on the camshaft with the O-ring package to prevent internal and external leakage with the camshaft with the 2 lobe of the rated position with the contour shape with the lobes inside with the shaft is placed in neutral position. Load will not touch any of the poppet. Working view with the poppeted 4-way valve. Alright, 1 cam lobe operative with the 2 pressure poppets with the other lobe operative with the 2 return exhaust pop with the top of the rotating with the camshaft with the exact position from the top and secure with the body with the extremity cutout section with the camshaft flame with the top of the and prevent with the over trouble with the trim of the cam lobe the top of the rotating with the poppet they have and see with as high as they can go. Figure 523 show the working view with the poppet type of the 4-way valve with the camshaft with the rotate with the moving the control hand with the either direction with the neutral with the lobe rotate with the unseen only with the pressure 1 pressure pop with the on 1 return exhaust pop with it. Valve is down with working with the position with the pressure fluid with the entry with the pressure port with the travel with the vertical fluid with the patch with the bolt with the pressure pop with the sieves. Since only 1 pressure pop with it is unseen with the cam lobe with the fluid flow with the capacity and unit open pop to the inside with the pop with the shield and flow with the 1 working port with the actuating unit with the pressure and fluid with the action unit ends with the working pop with it the fluid ends with the diagonal fluid patch with the pass unseen with the return pop with the vertical fluid flanges all one out of the return exhaust port pop with the return rotating camshaft with the opposite with the direction with the stop with the pin put hits with the opposite with the pressure with the return pits and unseen with the fluid flow with the reverse cup with the actuating unit moving the opposite direction. Your sliding spool valve with the 4-way sliding spool with the direction control valve is simple. The operation principle probably most durable and trouble-free with the all 4-way direction control valve with current U figure 524 should with a typical 4-way sliding directional control valve with the valve body contains 4 fluid ports of pressure with returning the exhaust tube working port with the preferred cylinder port with the house sleeve seal sleeve into the main bore body with the around the outside of the diameter sleeve with the O-ring gasket of the O-rings and sealed between the sleeve and the body. Figure 524 show with the diagram valve with the far right cylinder liquid from the pop that flow with the right end of the cylinder with the liquid to the left, the return with the liars is fire. In diagram C, the situation observed the piston with the far left of the cylinder with liquid from the pop out left end of the cylinder port with liquid over the right end of the return with the reservoir. Diagram B with the intermediate position flow with the through the valve of the port shuts off with the both ends. The cylinder can drain into. Alright, show the schematic of the 4-way directional control sliding spool valve with the pressure from cylinder to cylinder, return exhaust valve, pressure in the cylinder, return in exhaust, and returning exhaust from the cylinder. Reservoir unless other valves, either the shed with the control with the closed center spool with the piston and slot with all the patch with the valves are with the piston cylinder figure 524 diagram B. Closed center valve with the single pump with the actuating pump and furthermore in operation whether there must be no pressure shifting with the stroke direction working. Open center Figure 525 shows the center spool valve and the open center valve with the spool piston with the slide with the channel so with all the patches with the open each other with the piston center with the figure 524 some of the open center valve with the path the cylinder port block with the valve same with the liquid pump with the scare through the piston with the other side with the valve's reservoir. See figure 526 the liquid must be carried through both ends of the piston directional keep the imbalance instead of the discharging the reservoir when the valve is same with the liquid may be directed the other valve set with the operation performed in sequence. The open center valve with the U of the working cylinder does not have to be held in position pressure for the power to perform single operation valves. Also, shock for the system valve with the spool move from one position to the other since the intermediate. Figure 526 shows the open spool valve from the pump to cylinder. From pump cylinder to cylinder to reservoir. From cylinder to cylinder. Position pressure for the temporary relief of liquid passing from the pump directly from the reservoir. The manually operated four-way valve with the valve that you with the control of the flow direction manual with the spool shift to the operating with a hand lever with the figure 527 with the page 520 with the spring with the offset with the model spool the normally extreme of the valve with the position shift with the extreme of the position with the moving of the lever torque with the valve with the spring actuating automatically returns the spool with the lever with the normal operating position lever the relief of the two position no spring model spool shift back with the original position 527 the design show the valve with three position non-spring model intent device lock with the opens retained with a spool with one of three selected positions after the lever relief. The three position spring center model with the leverage of the shift the spool with the extreme position away from the center spring action automatically returns the spool to the center position with the lever's release. Pilot the operated four-way valve. Top of the valve with the control valve with the flow direction. U with the pilot pressure for the figure 528. Page 521 show the U with the spool with the shift with applying with the pilot pressure for the either end of the spool with the spring offset valve with the spool with the normal offset position spring thrust with the shift into the other position of applying with the pilot pressure for the end of the spool with the remove the pilot pressure shifting. Spool back to the normal offset position with the temp not held in value. The SOLI pilot pressure should be maintained as long as the valve with the shifted position. Solenoid operated two-way, four-way valve with the valve with the control with the direction of hydraulic fluid with electrical means spool shifted to the energized solenoid located with the bolt one or both ends of the spool with the solenoid's energy of the force push for the begin with the end of the spool shifts and with the solenoid toward the opposite of the end of the valve body with the figure 529, page 521 spring offset valve with the spring solenoid shift the spring load with the solenoid at the energized spring return to the spool with the original position. Flow control valves. Alright, flow control valves are even the control of the actuator speed with the metering fluid, with the metering measure with the regulating flow rate from the actuator, with the water faucet with the example of the flow control valve with the flow varied with the faucet with the hand with the turn clockwise, counterclockwise, cold position flow stop with the manual flow control valve with even the fluid power system, similar design and operation of water faucets. Hydraulics with the flow control valve generally even the control of the speed with the hydraulic motor work spin with the nav with the range with the tool head with the slide with the flow control valve incorporate the intake with the pressure with the compensator with the which can also the flow rate to the remain substantially uniform regardless of the change with the workload with the down pressure for the compensator flow with the control of the needle valve with the flow restriction, the loud change with the flow rate when the pressure drops and change. Variation basic flow control valve with the flow control check valve with the flow control overload relief valve with the model with the flow control check valve series with the incorporated integral check valve with all low reverse flow free flow model with the flow control overload relief valve series with the incorporated with integral relief valve with limited system pressure. Some of the valves are gas mounted and some of the panel mounted. Spring offset pressure P with the cylinder A with the cylinder B, the tank T with the open center with the slow center type with the center position, those position, spring offset with the pressure of P, the cylinder B, the cylinder tank A, pressure of the cylinder A, open center type with the pressure of the cylinder A, cylinder tank B, open center with the spring center, no spring, pressure A, cylinder, pressure T, spring spouse pressure with no pressure at X, no pressure at X, no spring, Alright, gate valve. At the top of the gate valve, wedge gate valve controls the valve with the open and close of the pass chain wheel with the wedge of the gate with the open and down and curve the flow line with the figure 30 with the page 52 show with the principal element of the gate valve with the area of A show with the iron connection for the outside structure of the valve with the A with the valve B area with the B show with the wedge of the gate with the inside of the valve with the stem and the width of the gate and the handle attached. When the valve is open, the gate stands up with the inside of the bottom with the bottom flush with the wall of the line. When the valve is closed, the gate valve flows with the standing straight with the curve of the line where it with the reset with the firmly again with the 2C with the extended completely around the line. Alright, so you have solenoid 1, solenoid 2, valve spool with two return lines and an actuator and pressure in. Gate valve allows a straight valve with the outside with a little no resistance fluid with the wind valve with a completely open with sometimes the gate valve is a partially open position restricts the flow with the figure 5 29 solenoid operates sliding spool directional control valve. Here, after the main view for the fully open and fully closed with the valve with the left partially open with the valve face standing with the fluid flow with the back on the face from the closet to over the road. B, the globe valve with the disc screw with directly on the end of the stem of the control number with the globe valve with the valve is closed with the lowering of the disc into the valve. C, with the sum of the flow equal to the on all sides of the stem with the support with the valve is open. There is none with the unbalanced pressure with the disc with the cowl with the uneven wear with the figure 531 show with the globe valve. The needle valve with the needle valve similar to the design of the operation globe valve. Instead of the needle valve, it has a long tapered point with the end of the valve stem figure 532 show with the section with the needle valve with a long tapered valve with the needle valve with the open and closed with gradually with the needle valve with you with the control of the flow. Figure 530 show the cross section of gate valve, show the control wheel, seal of control screw, adjusting gate in the bonnet and seat. Figure 531 show the operation of the globe valve, show the control screw and the disc on the seat. Your needle valve show the section view of the thing. And 2 delegate gauges which damage of the high pressure fluid will be some of the delivered end of the operation work with the motion of the halt slowly. Other operation precise flow adjustment are necessary. At points small flow rate is desired. Show the figure 533 show the fixed restrictor. A restrictor is a liquid power system and the limited movement of the C with the B of a certain device for the limiting of the flow rate of the line with the figure 33 show the flow restrict the figure 34 show the variable restrict the variable the restriction amount with the modified with the needle valve with the valve with the B with the pre-adjusted to the operating time of the particular subsystem that can be adjusted to meet the requirement of the particular stem. Alright, 534 show the variable restrictor of the bind and the screw and adjusting screw. With the orifice screw with the valve with the liquid with the power system with the normal operation one direction limited to speed with the figure 530 show the 230 for check two orifice check valves. Alright, it shows 1, 2, and 3 with the 4 inlet and outlet pressure A and B. 1 is the outlet port, 2 is the cone, 3 and 4 is the inlet port, 5 is the orifice. Figure 536 shows flow equalizer, flow divider, some of the hydraulic system, the synchronized with the operation, 2 actuating with the equalizer divides single stream with the flow with the directional control valve, 2 equal streams, each actuating unit receive the same flow rate with the move of the unison with the 2 with the stream with the return fluid operating with the opposite direction, fluid equalizer combined with the equal rate, but less the equalizer flow, equalizer synchronized with the actuating unit with the movements during the both directional operational directions. Figure 536 of the page 524 show the type of the flow equalizer valve is in splitting the divider flow position fluid under pressure for the directional control valve. The insert of the port 3 with the pressure overcomes spring tension, and this one shows a big picture of flow equalizer. Forces 4 plugs down and cover the 2 over the sleeve of the 2, then fluid splits and should the flow equal slide passages 1 and 5 fluids through splitting check valves 7 and 15 meter and groove 10, 14 ports 9 and 13 connection line actuating cylinders. Any of the difference of flow rate between the 2 passages resolve the pressure difference between the 2 passages. Free floating meter piston 11 show the shift the equalizer with the internal pressure equalizing flow. Alright, 1 is the side passage, 2 is the sleeve, 3 is the entrance port, 4 is the casing, the plug, 4 is a plug, 5 is a side passage, 6 is a combining check valve, 7 is a split checking valve, 8 is a piston land, 9 is a exiting port, 10 is a meter and groove, 11 is a free floating meter piston, 12 is a piston land, 13 exiting port, 4 is a 14 meter and groove, 15 is a splitting check valve, and 16 is your combining check valve. So that was a flow equalizer. Alright, figure 5-4, valve installation. Since flow control valve, the meter flow in one direction, flow with the inlet and outlet ports must be directly connected with the trigger to relate for the flow direction to be moved with the valve. The drain with the connection must be piped with the tank with the connection will be natural with the public. Possible pressure served with the location flow control valve with respect to the workload effect with the trigger operating with the character of the three basic type of the flow control valve that install with the meter in, meter out, and bleed off circuits. Meter in circuits, figure 537 on the circuit with the flow control valve install with the pressure line with leads for the work cylinder. All of the flow enter for the work cylinder is first through the meter through the flow control valves into the metering of the action includes the involved with the reducing of the flow of the pump, the work zone of the pump that must be delivered more flow, but then in required the action with the cylinder to desired speed, excess fluid for return of the tank through the relief valve to conserve the power and avoid undue stress of the pump. The relief setting valve setting should be only slightly higher than the working pressure for the one which cylinder requires. Figure show the meter in control, show the pressure of the drain and the PSI before the cylinder, and then return from the PSI 0 would be 0 on the return. Thus 5400 work load. Meter in circuit is ideal application where load is always offered for the positive resistance flow with the during the control stroke. For example, the feed grinding, table, the welding, machines milling machine with the rotary hydraulic motor drive with the flow control check valve with the tip of the circuit with the would allow with the reverse free flow with the return stroke with the cylinder, but would not provide with the control of the return stroke speed. B. The meter out with the figure 538, show the page 526 with the meter out circuit with the flow control valve that is installed on the return side of the cylinder, so that the controls of the cylinder actuating meter is discharged with the flow with the relief valve above the operating pressure, slightly above the operating pressure that is required by the type of the work. The type of the circuit is ideal for the overhauling load for the application for the workload 10 with the pull and operating position piston faster than the pump to deliver the wood warm. The example of would be free drilling, reaming, boring, turning, and the threading and the tamp, and cutting off the cold saw machines. A flow control valve check will allow you with the circuit that would allow with a reverse flow that would not be provided with the control return stroke with speed. Your bleed off control with a typical bleed off circuit with the install directly with the feed line with the TD with it is in the line with the actually connect with the return line with the valve regulator with the cylinder with the diverting with adjustable piston with the piston flows with the tank since fluid delivered with the work cylinder does not have to pass through the flow control valve. The excessive fluid does not have to be dumped through the relief valve. The type of the circuit that usually involves less of the generated should be covered because of the pump of the equal with the work resistance for the feed operation. 2. Compensated flow. The flow control valve discovered that does not compensate with the flow of the chain with the fluid temperature with the pressure with the conserve with the non-compensating valve with the fluid rate with the valve with the care and vary with the fixed setting either with the pressure with the fluid with the temperature chain with the viscosity of the internal resistance fluid with the stop the flowing. The liquid that flows easily with a high velocity with the viscosity chain with the control with the temperature chain with the cover with the low variation through the valve with the serve of the valve that can be the liquid power system with a slightly flow variation not critical consideration. However, the some of the system require extremely accurate with the control of the actuating device within such a system compensated flow return control valve with the valve will automatically change with adjusting pressure for the applicant with the restriction provided by the constant flow of the given setting valve meter with the constant flow regardless of the variation setting. The system pressure for the compensating flow control valve with the mainly with the meter fluid flowing with the circuit. However, that can be used with the meter fluid as the leaf circuit with the polarity of the manual is referred to the valve and the flow regulator. 5.5 valve failures and remedies. Hydraulic valve with the precision made must be very accurate. The control of the fluid pressure for the direction valve. In the system, generally no pack with the valve since the leakage is slightly large. Low with the valve with carefully fitted with them to keep the condition examined. Such for the dirt and oil with the major problem with the valve failure. Remember the dirt, lint, and rust sludge can cover the knowing malfunction successfully damage the valve part. For some of the material of the valve, the stick of the small plug small opening of the braid for the mating surface of the valve leak with also with the condition from the result of the poor machine, the operation of the even complete stoppage of the damage of eliminated with the operator, you with the care say, keeping out dirt, using only specified oil with the hydraulic system recommendation with the machiner's operator main with both oxidation procedures for rusting particles, oil that will not oxidize, changing the oil and surface of the fluids regulated with the servicing valve with the do not with the before servicing valve with the disconnect with electrical power source with the before remove the hydraulic valve with the component, thus limiting the starting the equipment accidental shorting of the tool move the valve control level with all directional leave the system hydraulic pressure before disconnecting any of the hydraulic valve components, black up all lower and all hydraulic unit with the ground before disconnecting parts, clean the valve and into the surrounding air before the remove the getting surface. Use steam cleaning equipment if available. Do not allow the water to enter from the system. Be certain that all the hose and line connections are tight. Use fuel, oil, and other suitable solvent to clean. The steam cleaning is not possible to have with the paint thinner and acetone with the poles immediate After disconnecting lines, disassemble the valves. Disassembling valve. Do the following with the disassembling of valves. Do not perform surface work on the hydraulic valves in the interior of the shop floor on the ground where there is danger of the dust or the dirt being blown into the part. Use only a clean bench area with the part. Be certain that all the tools are clean and free of the grease for the dirt. Be careful to identify with the parts. Disassembling later. Reassembling spool with the selective with the fitting with the valve body that must be returned to those same body that must be reassembled the valve section with the same order. Caution: be very careful to remove the back plug on a spring-loaded valve. The person can include injury could result. Be very careful when you clamp the valve within the house and the valve do not damage the component of the possible devices. Equip with the lead with the barrel jass to protect with the component with the wrapping and protect the covering, and make sure that the seal of all the valve openings are the remove the component during surface work. Do seal with the vent form material with the engine with the housing. Press to remove the spring with the under the high pressure. When all the valve components are clean and mineral oil surface with the corrosive cleaning of the part of the compressed air place with the oil on clean surface with the inspection net. Wipe the valve with the waste paper, the rag linen deposits on any of the parts entry of the hydraulic system. Cover the trouble with the carbon tetrachloride with any of the cleaning as a cleaning solvent to deteriorate with the rubber seals. Coat all the parts with the rubber inhibiting hydraulic oil immediately after cleaning with the drying them. Make sure to keep the parts clean and free of the moisture until they're reusing and reinstalling them. Inspect the valve spring carefully with the disassembling of them. Replace all of the spring with the show of the spring with the cocked or crooked ones containing broken or fractured rusty coils. Use spring tester check the strength of the spring with the pounds compressed and specified limit. Figure 539. Repairing valve with the following paragraph of the repair with the directional control valve, volume control with the pressure control valve, the directional control valve, the directional control valve spool with the install of the valve housing by select home fit with the doing to provide the closest possible fit between the housing and the spool with the minimum internal leakage, maximum holding quality that makes it a close fit with the need of the special factory techniques, and the equipment there must be valve speed with the body with the furniture for the surface only with the match set but not available to the individual for replacement. When repairing valves, inspect the valve spool with the bore burrows with the scoring as the figure 540 show that become of the code with the impurity with the hydraulic oil with the scoring and the coating with the not deep enough the cut leak problems polish for the surface with the corrosive cloth with not remove any of the valve material with the replace with the valve body and spool with the scoring with the coating excessive if the valve action is erratic and sticky before you remove it may be unbalanced because of the wear of the spools or body or replace the valve. 2. Volume control valve on the valve smooth with the orifice. Inspect with the clogging of the dirt of the form material. Figure 541. Clean with the valve with the compressed air with a small wire with the rewash with all of the parts solely. Remove all the memory and metal particle with the abrasive of the code. We quickly damage the entire hydraulic system. Check the valve spool with freedom of movement in the bore lightly oiled and valve should slide in the bore. The own weight pressure control valve with the figure 542. The check with the weak of the relief valve spring has indicated spring tester system. Check the valve with indicated low pressure for the immediate remedy to the replacing spring and adding shim with the degree for the compression spring, and in some cases never add so many of the strings with this compressed solid. The valve seats and pop with the check of the valve seat with a possible leak of the scoring. Replace the valve with the flat spot appear on the seat or on the pop with the clean surface polish of the metal valve seat with the pop with the scoring with the non deep but do not remove any of the valve material. Some seats the valve poppets are made with them which the long wearing elastic enough to conform perfectly to mating surface, giving them with the tight seal with the nylon seat with the pop of the valve will take away with the no damage of the mating metal point with the remaining of the repairing these valves will always replace with the nylon parts with the new nylon surfaces. Alright, so figure 540 shows valve inspection. Inspect the seal for leakage to check for the scoring on the lands. Inspect the burring for edges and locate coating on this area. Valve control valve, check for the orifice for clogging, check for the burring at the edge of the ports, and inspect valve for spool or scoring, inspect spring. Figure 542, pressure control valve, check mating surfaces, look for scoring on the valve, inspect the boring of the house bore. Alright, each relief valve cartridge stamped with the part number, the pressure limit, the date with the manufacturer figure 544, page 530. Let's go to the testing with the cartridge tab of the valve cartridge with the pressure setting with the install of the system operating at E with the reach of the valve opening with the pressure of the read with the pressure on the gauge that is installed with the valve circuit. Alright, figure 5-6 valve is telling to do the following when assembling the valve. Ensure the valves are clean with the wash for the part with the kerosene blow with the drive of the air, with the tip of them with the hydraulic oil with the rust inhibitor preventing rusting. Doing so will add in assembly provide initial lubrication. You also use petroleum jelly to hold the seal rings into place during the assembly. Figure 534, check with the cartridge relief type of the valve, check with the screen for clogging, check with the inspect with the clogged orifice, inspect with the O-ring for damage, check with the seats for the damage. Double check with the make sure the valve mating surface is free of all the burrs and paint. Replace all of the seal of the gaskets, preparing the valve with assembly soap with a new seal of the gaskets and seal. Clean hydraulic oil before assembling. Doing so will prevent the damage and help to seal the valve parts. Make sure that you trim the valve spool with the match board with the must assembly with the valve section in the correct order. Make sure that there's no distortion of the mounting valve. The distortion can be used with the uneven tension of the mounting bolts of the oil flange with the uneven the mounting surface, the improper valve location, efficient along with the line expansion with the oil temperature rate. Any of these can result with the valve spool binding. Check with the action of the valve spool after tightening the bolts if there is any sticking in the binding, adjusting with the tension of the mounting bolts. Alright, it's figure 544. Show the reading of the cartridge type, the date of the manufacturer, pressure limited with the parting number. There's a tab 7 of the troubleshooting valve listed below with the air with the diagram for the hydraulic valve with the working on a specific machine with a refer to the machine technical manual with the more information. Pressure control valve, the following list for the information troubleshooting the relief for the pressure reducing sequence unloading valve. The relief valve with the relief valve because they have low and erratic pressure. Adjust the incorrect with the dirt and shift the burrs for the hole in the valve and partially open the pop to see if the worn damaged valve's piston with the main body. Stick the spring is weak with the spring end with the damaged valve body of the seat is cocking, or if the balance holds is blocked. Consider the following when troubleshooting the leaf valve because there is no pressure, or if the balance hole with the plug the pop does not sit. See, the valve has a loose fit with the valve in the body of the cover bind of the valve. Spring is broken with the dirt or chip the bird with the holding valve partially open. The pop the seat is worn or damaged. Valve in the body or seat is cocking. Consider the following the troubleshooting the leaf valve because they have except for the noise or shatter. All velocity 2 have the pop the seat with the fault warning with line pressure for the except for the return pressure seating is too close to the other valve within the circuit. Improper spring is used behind the valve. Consider the following with the troubleshooting with the relief valve with the cover that can adjust improperly without getting except for the system pressure. System spring is broken with the spring is fatigued with valve with improper setting with the drain line is restricted. Sure the following troubleshooting the leaf valve because that might be overheating of the system. Operation continue with the release setting. It will constitute too high and valve seating is leaking. Pressure reducing valve, consider the following with the troubleshooting pressure reducing valve that have an erratic pressure. Dirt is in the oil with the pop of the sheet with the worn, the oil with the balance that will restrict the valve, spool bind is in the body. Drain line is not open free with the to the reservoir. Spring ends are not square. Valve is not in an improper has an improper spring. Spring is fatigued. Valve needs for the adjustment. Spool board is worn. Pressure sequence valve. Consider the following with the troubleshooting pressure sequence valve to cover the relief valve. Cover the valve does not function properly. Installation was improper. The adjusting was improper. The spring is broken. The formative matter is on the plunger seat or in the orifice of the gasket is leak air blown. The drain line is plugged with the valve cover that not tightened properly or installed wrong. The valve plunger is worn and score with the valve seat is worked and worn and score with the orifice are too large which cover the jerky operation. Bending curves because of the moving the parts of the cover with the oil impurity due to the overheating of the using improper oil. Consider the following with the troubleshooting the pressure sequence valve. The cover there is premature movement of the secondary operation valve setting is too low with the accepted load of the primary cylinder. High and air load on the primary cylinder. Consider the following the troubleshooting the pre-sequence valve. The cover there is no movement in the secondary operation is slow. Valve setting is too high. The relief valve setting is too close. The sequence valve with the valve spool binding is in the body. Unloading valve with consider the following troubleshooting on these valves will become the valve failed to completely unload the pump. Valve setting is too high. The pump does not build with the unloading valve pressure. Valve spool binds is in the body. Direct control valve. The directional control valve included in the spool rotary. Check valves connect with the following. The troubleshooting these valves because there is faulty including complete shifting. Control linkage is worn or binding the pilot pressure for the insufficient solenoid is burned out or faulty. Consider spring is defective. Spool adjusting and spool adjustment is improper. Cylinder following with the troubleshooting the direction control valve to cover the actuating cylinder creep or drift the valve spool with the sound properly with the valve spool with the downshift is completely. Valve spool body is worn, but leakage occurred with the bass of the piston of the cylinder valve see if they are leaking. Consider the following with the troubleshooting the direction control valve because of the cylinder load drop of the spool with a certain position. Lines for the valve housing are loose. Oil rings are lockout with the spring with the plugs are leaking. Lockout springs are broken. The relief valves are leaking. Consider the following with the troubleshooting the direction control valve because of the cylinder load drops slightly when it is raised. Check the valve spring on the seat with the defective spool valve position is adjusted improperly. Consider the following when troubleshooting the direction control valve because of the oil or closed center system. Valve seat leaks, pressure in a return circuit. Valves are not adjusted properly. Volume control valves include the flow control flow with the divider valve. Consider the following troubleshooting these valves because there are variations in flow. Variable valve spool binds and body cylinder motor leaks. Oil viscosity is too high. The pressure drops insufficient area across the valve. Oil is dirty. Consider the following when troubleshooting volume control valves because of the erratic pressure. Valve pop at the seat is worn. Oil is dirty. Consider the following when troubleshooting volume control valves because of the improper firing. The valve was not adjusted properly. The valve piston travel is restricted. Passes orifice is restricted. Valve piston is cocked. The relief valve is leaked. Oil is too hot. Consider the following troubleshooting volume control valves because of the oil is heat. heats, pump at speed and improper. The hydraulic functions are holding and relief. The connections are incorrect. Chapter 6, Circuit and Diagrams and Troubleshooting.